Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes from For Your Canine.
And Joanne Sawicki from For Better For Worse.
Let us know you're out there. Today, we're going to talk about chewing and what's normal and what's not. So I wanted to. It's something that we've all dealt with at some point, but there is some of you that have young dogs or young puppies. Just some additional information of things you can look for. Hi, Karen. You can look for and maybe and what's normal and what's not, because I've had some experience with dogs that have a pretty severe chewing issue, a little different than what we would see at home and all that stuff. So that's why we decided, well, let's do this topic, because I think there's some interesting things about it. So, and some of you have puppies like Ronnie and Judy. Yours aren't so puppy, but they're young. Anyway, so chewing. When they're puppies, it's pretty basic. They're teething, so their gums hurt, so they need to keep constant keep the gums because they itch. So having stuff for puppies to chew on is really important. And it's hard to say. I mean, teething usually starts from 5 months until about 6, 7-ish months. However, when you have a young dog, you want to make sure they understand what's okay to chew and what's not okay to chew. So you have to keep a really good eye on them and making sure that they have the right things to chew, and also not destructive chewing, and also chewing that might cause you. Hi, Veronica. Oh my goodness. You tuned in. And things that might cost you some money, which Joanne has had actually happen. So, and I know a lot of people who've had some surgical issues because of chewing. So we wanted to kind of talk about that. And interestingly enough, it's not so breed specific, because my first lab, Kaiser, was a very intense chewer, and my first German Shepherd, Cha-Cha, not so much. Now I have Jive, who's my second lab, not such a big chewer, and then I have Tango, who was a pretty big chewer when he was young, so I had to really watch him and what he was chewing on. So I know some of the stuff is going to be basic, like don't leave your shoes out, don't leave stuff they can get to, all those basic, money. Talk about it. So all the things that they shouldn't be able to get to, and keep an eye on them, because usually a quiet dog, a quiet puppy is never a good thing. So for example, when my Beagle was young many years ago, she was very quiet. My husband thought, oh, wonderful, she's real quiet. Well, she was chewing on the baseboards in my kitchen that we subsequently had to replace as she got older, because she just went to town on that. So, and those are things that it happens to all of us, but it's you want to keep your eye on the puppy, and also things that you can, or like have things that the dog can chew, right? That they can have, that's okay. I'm kind of a big Kong person, and those of you who feed raw or not, bones are fantastic when they're young like that, and antlers are the ones I go to when they're puppies. Having said that, some of the antlers are pretty hard, so when they become adults, it's not such a great thing, depending on how aggressive a chewer. If you have a very aggressive chewer, antlers are not going to be a good choice for you, because they can crack their teeth, they can have all kinds of other issues. So I still go to Kongs. I still have them, and I still do quite a bit of them. What else?
Yeah.
Joanne, for chewing.
So I think for appropriate chewing, right, and we're just talking about keeping the dog busy, you have to be careful with them. But for young puppies, I actually do like bully sticks if they're really going to be big chewers. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is they're just soft enough to sink those sharp puppy teeth into. And the dogs seem to really, really enjoy them. But you have to be careful, because bully sticks are pretty high in fat. So you can't give them all the time. And when they do get down, you should take them away, because last thing you want is your puppy swallowing a chunk of that, even though they're digestible. Still not a good thing. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, but I use Kongs as well. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, I think one of the best tricks for Kongs is to put it in the freezer. whatever you stuff it with, I freeze it and it lasts 10 times longer.
And as a matter of fact, today I was driving back from Joanne's. That's what I had is 2 frozen Kongs, and I gave it to my dogs for the trip home. Keeps them busy and keeps them occupied. I usually still to this day, I still have about, I don't know, 6 to 8 Kongs in my freezer for stuff with. I usually use a mixture of peanut butter, cream cheese, pumpkin, mix it all up, stuff it, and then freeze it. Works fantastic. They love it.
Yeah, and mine don't actually like peanut butter very much. I know I have weird dogs. So I use a mixture of pumpkin and cream cheese and Braunschweiger, or the liver sausage, right? Yes. And then they go to town on that. So again, though, you can't give 3 Kongs a day. That stuff is pretty darn high in fat, so you need to use it sparingly, which is why it helps to freeze it, because it lasts that much longer.
Right. And that's why I always, like I said, my freezer always has, and usually sometimes for the Facebook Lives, that's what they're getting is Kongs, so they can be quiet and keep busy while we're doing everything. So it's very helpful and keeps them busy and doing appropriate things. Bully sticks too under supervision, because they can get pretty small and then they can swallow those.
Yeah, and if if you're not a Kong person, there's other toys like that. Like I really like the Westpaw. I can't remember if it's called the Zogoflex. Is that the one that has the nubs on the bottom? It's kind of a
I think so.
I think so. Anyway, Westpaw is a company, and so one of them is it's like kind of a circular dish and it has little nubs on the bottom, so you can put even some kibble in there and cover it up with stuff. I love those. And if you really want to be frugal, you can buy your little femur bones kind of cut up, the smaller sized ones. And once the dog has licked the nice bone marrow out of there from a frozen bone, you can actually reuse those and stuff those and put them in the freezer as well.
Yeah. Westpaws are awesome. Yeah. And I absolutely, hi, Janice. I absolutely love when my dogs were puppies, on the bones, the raw bones. It was very helpful for when they're teething. What happens is it really kind of, one of my dogs, I can't remember which one, the puppy teeth weren't coming out really quickly. So I gave her bones and just chewed enough that, ended up the puppy teeth came out on its own without having to go in and have it surgically removed, because that's kind of a pain and very expensive as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about puppy teething just for a minute. And I actually have a really strange personal story that I will share with you that makes me, my heart goes out to puppies. So I am one of those very strange people. My lower jawbone grows into the bottom of my mouth. So I don't have like a clear cut. I have a weird bone that comes in that my tongue sits on top of. I know this is a weird story, but so I all of a sudden kept cutting my tongue on something and my mouth got really, really sore and I kept getting these headaches. And so I went to the dentist and he sent me to an oral surgeon. And what was happening was a piece of my jawbone was coming through the inside of the bottom of my mouth. It was a very tiny bone shard, but the oral surgeon said, oh yeah, just pick at it until it falls out, which is not something dentists usually tell you. But I mean, I will tell you, my mouth was visibly swollen from this teeny tiny, probably the size of a number 2 pencil tip, right? My whole jaw was swollen. It was red. I had a headache. I didn't feel like eating. Everything just felt really icky. And that was one tiny piece. So I have a kind of a newfound, I feel really bad for puppies, and like my little guy, when I first brought my Vizsla home, I think when he started teething, I think he lost all of his teeth in a matter of 2-3 weeks. His mouth was just purple. It was so swollen. I felt so bad for him. So, lifting up that gum to be able to kind of check and see what color it is, normal gums are nice and pink like bubble gum. So if you notice something that's super red or swollen, it hurts. So no bones. I also went to a Target, a Walmart, and I bought like a 5-pack of wash rags, just like simple, like face cloth wash rags. And so I will run them under the sink. I wring them out one at a time, and I put them in a Ziploc, and I would put those in the freezer. And as I would bring them out, it really was almost like a nice crunchy teething ring for the puppy. And all the little nooks and crannies from when you twist it, let them get all that teeth in there. They can kind of rearrange it how they want to put it in their mouth, where they want it to sit at. It's a supervised only toy, but it really seemed to help with the mouth. And then the other thing I did for my guy, just because I knew he felt so crappy, was I found some liquid Tramiel, which is a homeopathic, kind of a homeopathic pain med. And so I would rub that kind of on the inside of his cheeks so he could absorb that a little bit. It was pretty safe, and it helped him out a little bit. So
yeah, and the freezing with the bones and the kongs and the washcloths help with the swelling of the puppy teeth. So it's really very helpful.
Yeah.
And so and with the puppies, always supervised, right? And puppies can go through long periods of time chewing appropriate things and not needing to chew other things, or it may look like they have slowed down in that chewing, but they haven't. It will, as they become adolescents, you'll see it pick up again. Not in the same way though, because they're not teething. They're just, if they're bored, if you're not exercising your dog, or if you're not doing much with them, that's when you can see some of that chewing increase. My male shepherd Tango was one of those. He still enjoys chewing, but you could see if he was bored or he didn't have anything to do, he was gonna choose something he shouldn't have. Where my girls, my Lab and Cha-Cha, never did that. They were always, whatever I gave them, it was fine. And that what happens with that is when you're not watching it, it can become a very expensive proposal. So one of the things that Tango enjoys eating and chewing on is tennis balls. So twice he chewed a little piece of a tennis ball. I caught it in time, so he was able to pass it because he's such a big dog. The second time he got a hold of a tennis ball, he ate half of it. And the only reason I knew he ate half of it is because my Lab was running around with the other half. And I asked her, I said, so what do you got there, honey? And she showed me the tennis ball, a half of it. And I said, where's the other half? And there's no pieces or anything to be found. So I just assumed Tango was the one that ate it. And so I gave him hydrogen peroxide and maybe hopefully throw it up, because he did chew them into small pieces. So I wasn't worried about if it came back up. But no go. So I had to take him to the vet. Fortunately, it was recent. It hadn't started processing through the digestive tract. So they were able to he was able to throw it up, and it came out that side, which was a little cheaper than having to go in and fish for it. So after that, he still gets tennis balls, but only with me. We play, and then they're put away. He never has access to those anymore, because I don't trust that he might decide to chew one up, and because he swallows that. The only thing, toys or whatever, that he swallows. He's pretty good about everything else, but not that so much. And Joanne has a more expensive story.
Oh, the Doberman. So anyone who's ever known Dobermans, they can have kind of fetishes to suckle things. So if you're really lucky, they don't actually suckle themselves. So they like to kind of suckle toys, and some of them don't have it at all. But this is my second Doberman, who kind of likes to nurse on toys. So he'll just bunch them up in between, and he'll actually sit there and suck it like a baby bottle. So the cutest thing when they're little, right? Little adolescents, and then you see them start to do this. Well, pretty soon you notice, oh, okay, well, that toy's kind of torn up. So I take it away, and I take this away, because the Vizsla, of course, loves to tear things up and leave pieces around. So I had to be very careful. And all of a sudden one day I kind of saw him like, bleh, and he puked up kind of like a foot of a toy. Oh, goodness. I did. Sorry, don't spit your water, Nancy. So, I had realized, okay, was this an accident, or is this something I really have to pay attention to? Well, boy, it was something I had to start paying attention to. And of course, the next moment, I think it was a week or two after that, my dog threw up. Now, That's a whole nother Facebook Live. But let me tell you, dogs don't puke on a regular basis. It's a rare occurrence.
Right.
Okay? So he threw up, I think, in the morning, and I am watching him like a hawk. What is going on? I went to feed him breakfast. He didn't eat breakfast. I'm like, all right. So I was just watching. He went to drink some water and he threw up again. And we were on our way to the vet. Okay. And so the vet was doing some barium and it was still sort of moving through. They weren't really wanting to rush into a surgery. And that night, take him home and see what happens. And so I took him home and the barium hadn't really passed through him yet, which is rare. It should go through by that moment in time. And he puked up what was rest of the barium. So away to the emergency vet we went. And the emergency vet was like, well, it hasn't been 24 hours. I don't see anything. We'd hate to open him up and not find anything. And I said, I know my dog, you'll find something. Well, sure enough, they did the surgery and they found a squeaker encased in the little piece of fabric. It had been in there such a little amount of time that it hadn't even turned color yet. It was just kind of still a white piece of fabric. So that surgery was $2,200. Yeah, it was not a cheap surgery. And I will tell you what, even after that, you'd think dogs would learn. They don't. He's eaten a couple more things, but again, he's had a lot of hydrogen peroxide in his life. And he turned 3. Actually, he's 3.5 now. I haven't seen him try or even remotely attempt to eat anything in about 6-7 months. So I'm hoping he's past it. But I just like to share, it's a nasty, nasty surgery. However, the longer that you wait on something like that, the worse it gets, because as that blockage happens, it usually cuts off blood flow. And when blood flow stops, tissue dies. Yep. And that's where they have to remove these big giant chunks of intestine or sometimes organs. So again, if your dog throws up and isn't feeling well, I know the vet can be expensive, but if that's out of the norm, and if you have dogs like Nancy and I, Nancy's Lab and my Doberman, if they don't eat, I'm at the vet. That is completely abnormal behavior. And if they absolutely haven't eaten and then have thrown up, something's very wrong. So don't wait. When you see signs like vomiting and the dog just feeling very lethargic and icky, don't wait. Get them in.
And all of us can make mistakes, so you don't beat yourself up about it, but try to be very vigilant about, like, I don't leave, toys are around. The minute they get torn up, we throw them away so that they're not eating them or whatever, so that, or they don't get even tempted. They haven't done it in a long time, but that doesn't mean they won't go back to, they might decide one day out of the blue that they're going to do that. So, so exercising your dog, making sure they have an enriched life, which a lot of us do. We do a lot of dog sports with them and stuff, so they're usually tired. Usually we'll get them through puppyhood and adolescence without a lot of drama, with chewed up things, right? So it's so that's really important to keep them very occupied, which I think a lot of people do. They do a lot of activities with their dogs and things like that. But if you have pieces of time where you're not doing too much, just be mindful that they might decide to start chewing on things that they wouldn't normally. Today, yep, right, Sharon. It doesn't, and it takes no time at all. It's amazing how fast they chew. How they can get the squeaker in or out of a thing, a toy, and also going back to antlers and bones. When they're puppies, it's usually not a problem. When they become adults, those can cost you a lot of money too. The antlers, especially if you have a pretty aggressive chewer, you can end up with needing a root canal or having roots exposed and stuff because they're so hard. So just be aware, when it might be okay when they're puppies, but when they become adults, it becomes a bigger problem. So you might not want to have those available to them. The other thing that I I used too was Himalayan Chews. They're pretty hard. They're like yak milk and stuff, and those are pretty good when they're young puppies and adults. But like I said, with the bones and some of the And some of the antlers, if they're really, really hard, that's why I like my antlers sliced in half so they can get that stuff out and they don't have to chew and they don't end up having problems with that. Because when that's when the teeth, you have dental problems, and talk about expensive. It's almost as expensive as our dental work. It's really crazy expensive to have that. Because I think there's been a few people I know that have had to have root canals and other things for the dogs because they chewed up something and they ended up needing a lot of extensive dental work. So just be aware of that. It's okay sometimes when they're puppies, but you might have to look at it again when they become adults, right? Don't let them do it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of you, that watch pretty regularly, you probably know that it's fine. Raw bones are fine for dogs, supervised. But just putting that out there, cooked bones are what they cannot have.
Right.
So that means if you boiled it for soup, that means if it was in the smoker, that means if it was in the oven, any of those. I mean, you can give smoked bones, like they sell them sometimes, but I'm not a fan because the dogs can really break off hunks of those. They crumble, they make a mess, and the dogs the bones get softer basically when they get cooked or they get heat applied, they get softer, which in the grand scheme of things you think would be better for their teeth, right? You're not going to crack teeth that way. But they can break off chunks and get shards, and that is what wreaks havoc kind of on the intestines and stomach.
Gorilla chew. I've not heard of that.
I wonder, is that kind of like the Benny bones or
could be
Nylabone type of stuff? She said Sully has a beef sensitivity. Not sure what to let him chew now. If he did have bones,
could do lamb femurs.
You could do lamb femurs. And Sharon, I'm not sure where you live, but like the buffalo or bison is kind of a little more common now. I know in my area, we absolutely have a bison farm, and they're at the farmer's market every Saturday, and they'll sell big giant femurs, or they'll sell the cut up bones. So bison's a nice other option to beef if your dog, can handle that.
Yeah.
But those lamb trotters, especially for a not huge dog, because the lamb trotters for big giant dogs don't last very long.
Yeah. And Judy, I have a feeling that retrieving the hides was going to happen anyway with the lab, but just putting it out there. Yeah, they can chew on the actual raw bone. Yes. But if your dog doesn't typically eat raw food, the raw bones, you want to introduce it pretty slowly. Let them chew it for a while, then take it away, put it back in the fridge or freezer, and so that way they don't get too much stomach upset. So. Yeah. So Sharon, you can probably have the lamb femurs. Those are pretty nice, and they're smaller. But he's a golden. Depending on, I think he should be okay. Depending on where you get them and all that stuff. So possibility.
Yeah, you could probably do a pork bone as well, but I don't know that those are as common. You'd probably have to visit a butcher and see if they could even get it for you.
Right. And again, if your dogs are raw fed, the bones are easy, but if they're even eating kibble, you might have to do a little, making sure probiotics and all that to make sure that they can handle the richness of the bone. Otherwise, they get diarrhea, which is, you don't want that. You don't want to take care of one problem and create a whole nother problem. So just do it slowly, very, very slowly. So, which brings us to a couple of. Judy reminded me with the socks. Labs and Goldens, wow. We had a lab that ate, they had, over the years, a client dog, lab, chewed, swallowed, in one surgery, had 3 socks, a washcloth. Oh, God. A washcloth, and one other thing that was in her gut when they went in there to get it out, because labs are just ridiculous about that. Goldens are too. So that brings us to talking about pica. So what is normal and what is not? So normally dogs are going to chew, and then you see that chewing behavior wane a little. Even the most aggressive chewers, that behavior slows down some, right? They don't continue that intense chewing forever. there's a point where oh yeah.
Well, I have had one of those.
Yeah. And it takes off. It lasts a long time. Yeah. So anyway, so you'll see that chewing behavior slow down over time. It'll be a little bit less frequent. They won't be as intense on the chewing. That's normal. When you have a dog that does not change over time for a long time, we had a client, a golden retriever, that had a pretty severe case of pica. He would swallow and eat anything, and that's what you're eating when it's non-food, right? He was eating anything. He even tried to swallow one of our staff members' cell phone. His poop was glorious colors.
Rainbow bright.
And by the time he was 6 months old, he had 3 surgeries to remove things. So that is not normal behavior. That behavior is a pretty, it's pretty marked. So those of you with puppies, just most of us, 90% of us are going to have dogs that are just going to chew. They're going to slow down, and then it won't be a problem anymore. But if you have a dog that has that intense chewing and that doesn't stop, so one of the things is it usually doesn't subside. It becomes sometimes worse, right? They swallow everything and they try to get everything. So it's hard to tell what the cause of pica is. It's hard to know. But so in this case, for this particular dog, it was a lot of anxiety. He was a pretty anxious dog. So that dog was just chewing and it was pretty bad. He was a lovely dog in every other way, but that was rough. Could be some kind of gastrointestinal parasites, things like that. So if you see that chewing increase and you see it not subsiding, get a medical workup first to make sure that it could be something simple like a parasite or some GI problem or things like that, right? Before you, because for some dogs, if it's anxiety based, they get an antidepressant to hopefully reduce that anxiety, or anti-anxiety meds, so they can reduce that anxiety and hopefully slow down that chewing, because it's very expensive to keep opening up your dog every few months to get stuff out of there. So it's one of those things that's not normal chewing. You always should see that chewing subside a little bit as they get older, or as their teeth come in. Once their teeth come in and they got their adult teeth, they don't chew as they don't want to chew as much as when they're in full blown teething mode, right? So pica it's very abnormal, and there's again, we don't really know the cause all the time, but it's just you'll not see that decrease in that behavior. You'll see that increase and continue, and it won't get better, right? So so it's something to just be aware of for those of you with new dogs.
Yep. And I mean, it can be more normal, right? If you have a dog that goes outside and eats dirt every once in a while, or, eats grass every once in a while, that's not something to be super concerned about. Right. What you're concerned about is the dog who's grabbing gobs of grass and dirt and sand and mulch and rocks and, anything that they can get their hand on. When I was doing dog rescue, I remember one of our people adopted a Neapolitan Mastiff, and the poor dog had to have both eyes removed due to an infection. And soon after that, she had 2 obstruction surgeries because she would just eat and eat and eat. And they ended up having to get a muzzle for her anytime. I mean, she would just have to wear this nice wire basket muzzle so that she couldn't eat things. I mean, you think, oh, how sad, but what's worse, right? She's going to die from an obstruction, or she has to wear a muzzle so she can't eat things. So it was a pretty severe case of pica. And it's not that common, but we mention it because it's pretty severe to the dog's system, and it's rare that you won't end up with a surgery.
Yeah. And people suffer, and as many of some people suffer from pica as well. So, where they eat food items. So we have animals can have that, but a lot of it has to do with anxiety. I know it does in people, and I know it does in dogs. So
Mhm.
it's one of those things to just be aware. I wouldn't, like, again, if your puppy is having a bad week, don't worry about it. It's probably normal. But if he's having a bad few months, pica and dogs, oh yeah, it's pretty rough too.
Yep.
It's very expensive, Judy, because most of the time before you realize it's pica, you've already done a couple surgeries on the dog, right?
Yep.
So it's and I remember the golden retriever that we had, very severe case. It was bad. He got his hands on everything. He ate lots and lots and lots of stuff, and they had to go in 3 times to get it out. So
Yeah, I was sitting next to a lady in the emergency vet who was there with her yellow lab. This was the dog's 7th time in the ER for eating things. I mean,
yeah.
Wow. And the lady was almost in tears. She said, I don't know what else to do. She goes, I have notes on every single cabinet. Shut the cabinet, shut the door, shut the this. She goes, I have kids at home. So she said, I try my best. She felt terrible. But it's like when you have a dog with that severity of issues that just is going to eat things, it's really, really hard to manage. I mean, again, like Nancy said, people do their best. And, I know sometimes we always look at people, well, just shut the door. It's like, it's not always that simple sometimes.
Right. So it's, but it could be in labs and Goldens.
Yeah.
Have I bet you labs and Goldens have probably financed quite a few vet hospitals in the world, because they tend to eat so much stuff and they try to get into so much, right? It's stressful for everyone, but a lot of times pica is, not always, because nobody really knows the cause, but a lot of times there might be an anxiety component or gastrointestinal. That's why it's always good to, if your dog's doing a lot of chewing and it's not slowing down, it's always good to do make sure that there's no parasites or anything like that.
Yeah. And so, moving into something that I just want to talk about that is not pica, but that can be absolutely very much human created in swallowing things, right? You guys, especially with the Goldens, and not you guys, but people with the Goldens and the Labradors, are classic. And I know I have a student with a Gordon who does the same thing. And as soon as you're like, what do you have? The dog's like, nothing. Right? And so, teaching your dog a really good kind of bring it out.
Drop it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if you have a dog that has a little bit of that, or you've created some of that, what do you have? It's not every dog that does it, but some dogs are like, nothing you're getting. Right. And so they will quickly swallow something. So I know it's not necessarily the chewing game, but, really be careful in the way that you're asking your dog what they've stolen, or teach them how to trade for something better. Right. And when my dogs are young, right, and they have something they're not supposed to, barring that it's super dangerous, right? But, if you have my shoe, I don't want you to have my shoe, instead of, going after them, basically I'm like, what do you have? What do you have? Come here. Let's see it, right? And as they come over, right, oh, that's pretty cool. I pick up the shoe. Look at that. What a good job. Thanks for bringing it to me. And I'll give them a cookie. Okay. So now it's become less of the whole, you can't have that. That's mine. Give it to me. Where you're like, oh my gosh, show me your prize. That's awesome. What a good dog. Thanks for bringing it over here. Right. You might get a crazy retriever that brings you, pieces of hair off the floor, but it's better than trying to eat stuff. And you'll have a heck of a retrieve if you play the game that way. So,
yeah. Well, Deb, you're so funny. You taught veto trade. Well, Cha-Cha, we didn't do a lot of it, but we her that if she bought something, she would get a treat. So she would be at work, she'd take a piece of paper off the desk and bring it to you so she can get a treat. So it can go a little bit wonky on that. And we didn't teach her that for chewing, because she was a pretty good puppy that way. She didn't chew, but she'd bring me the test, she'd pick up a pen, she'd pick up everything to bring it so I can give her a treat. So that was a little annoying, but
I see that dog hasn't changed in 12 years of finding creative ways to find a cookie.
Yes, she does. Yes, so she still brings stuff so I can get get a cookie. No, it's not dinner time yet. So yeah, so it's one of those things, right? Um, right, and definitely teach them a trade or a drop it, because those are life saving.
Yes.
And Joanne brings so this very very funny story. He's now 17, but at the time he was I don't know, 4 or 5, and he was at work, and we saw a little arm of a toy hanging from his mouth, and my co-instructor at the time, Lisa, I go, Lisa, try to go and get it. She tried to get there. Before she got there, he had swallowed it and then would not throw up. So that also was another trip to the vet to get it out, because he was too small of a dog for him to be able to pass that toy. So so unfortunately we had to have it come back up that way. So yeah, it's always and chances are it's like I just panicked and I'm like, try to get it, and he was like, nope, not getting it. So teaching him a drop it or an out would have been much easier. However, I've only had him for a few months at the time, so he hadn't been with me very long, so we hadn't had a chance to work on that. And that was the one only time that he did that, but it was like, oh my God. So yes, teaching a leave it or an out, super important. And or a drop it. And remember, leave it is ideally the best, right? Because leave it is before they get to the toy or whatever they have, where you can call them off of it, versus drop it when they already have it in their possession, which is once they have it in their possession, 9/10 of the law, so they get to keep it and swallow it. So water bottle, tops, yeah.
Yeah, so, Sue, that's actually funny. One of my co-instructors that teaches at my place, she has 2 Aussies, and one of the Aussies, it's so funny. Like, she comes into the room and she's like, "There's something going on back there. You should go check that out." Right? And the other dog's tearing something up. And she's such a tattletale, but man, those dogs are so great, right? Especially with another adult, because you're like, thanks for telling me. I won't keep you on the DL, right?
Yeah, but yeah, and it's really it's important that for chewing, you want to start teaching them that leave it or that drop it. If they're going towards something, it's nice to be able to call them off of it, or if they're already having the position, to be able to drop it without it being such a traumatic thing. Because what happens is we get very intense on what they have, and we put so much value in what they have because we don't want them to swallow it, right? So we are like, oh, we gotta get. So you create this intensity around that particular thing that the dog makes. It actually makes the dog want it more. So
I know. It's so. I wish you could film people in slow motion, because I mean, it probably is like to the dog, like, you know what I mean? Like, they're like, oh my God, swallow it, take it, run with it.
Yeah. And so it's really important that you don't give the item or make the item so valuable, because this is where we get a lot of people coming with their pet dogs. It's like, he runs around with whatever it is. It's like, well, yeah, because it's a game now, right? I take this, and I'll give you a quick little story. It was a lab, of course. And he was notorious for grabbing slippers and running around and taking them. So what happened is this was when I was doing in-home privates, and so we were talking in the kitchen with the young couple and myself. We're talking. Of course, he walks in with the slipper, and you see the reactions like, "Oh my God, he's got the slipper!" Again, putting lots of value on that slipper. And I go, "That's okay. Let's just keep talking and ignore him, and see what happens." And I said, if he drops the slipper, we're gonna give him all the attention, but we're at this point, we're gonna ignore him. So he comes in the kitchen more like, "Hello, look what I have. You usually chase me. Let's chase me because I have the slipper." So we ignored him, and then at one point he was like, and he drops it, and then he got lots and lots of attention, and that because for that dog, it was attention-seeking behavior, because he got attention when he had a slipper or whatever he had. So once they flipped it and he got the attention when he wasn't doing that, it was a game changer for everyone in the house, including the dog. So it was pretty good. But if you give so much value to the item, it's it makes the dog want it more. So yeah.
Yeah, and Judy, your story's pretty darn scary, right? Her dog was picking up cigarette butts and a joint, apparently. But right, I mean, that's really really scary, because that stuff is absolutely very poisonous to the dog. So and especially something like cigarette butts, which are, I mean, are all over the sidewalk, right? So that's another game where if it was really a thing and it was every time, I might be like, I might train a behavior for that, right? Like every time my dog sees a cigarette butt, it alerts to it somehow and then looks at me, and I pay the crap out of it, right? Especially if it's a really tiny dog that is going to end you up in the hospital. But yeah, that's a scary one.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. It's like you find if you have a dog, especially that has pica, or a puppy that picks up and grabs everything, it's really, really, you really want to nip that in the bud before it becomes a bigger problem. So the other thing we want to talk about is eating poop. Yeah, which is absolutely, absolutely gross, and I can't stand it. But so one of the things I got to tell you, we don't know, nobody knows why it happens, why some dogs do it, why some dogs don't, and why dogs may start doing it and stop. So poop eating, the only way to really stop it is to pick up the poop right away, so that they don't get a chance to eat them, and they don't practice the behavior, and thus not doing it or eliminating that behavior. Because my beagle, when she was a puppy, was one of those. So ended up picking up all the poop immediately, and then she didn't get a chance to practice it, so it went away. But that's hard for us, right? Because we have to be the ones, making sure we're out there picking it up and all that stuff. And some puppies do grow out of it, and some puppies don't. So let me just tell you a quick story. Amy, a friend of ours, Amy, has a dog that was eating, poop, and he comes in. I can't remember which dog of hers was. He comes in the house. She's laying down, I think, in bed still in the morning. Comes back in the house, and he gets sick, and he pukes on her. And that, she wins. We were sharing gross dog stories. She still holds the number one position on that. That was absolutely disgusting. And the litter boxes too. The litter boxes. Thanks, Karen, for bringing that up. The litter boxes. It's not only the cat poop that's an issue, right? It's the litter, that the cat poop is in, that can cause some major problems in your dog, because they may or may not pass it depending on what you're using. Because we had a client's dog that ate so much cat poop with litter that ended up having this big, huge mass in the stomach from the litter. It was awful.
Yeah, it doesn't just clump in the box. Anything that's wet that touches it, it'll stick to. Right. So it can be bad. Yeah. Going back to that nasty story of poop eating, it's they don't know what causes it. They do know a couple of things, right? And I think one of the biggest ones from me doing rescue for so many years, when you encounter these puppy mill dogs, or dogs that were tied to a tree or to a doghouse, or had a very confined space that they never got out of, some of those dogs do it and have done it their lives to keep their areas clean. I find that's one of the hardest ones to break. Mm-hmm. I mean, like literally, if it's on the ground, I had one. Poor thing, was tied to a doghouse for most of her life. She ate it straight out of the machine, so I didn't get a chance to pick it up. It was the nastiest thing ever. So, it was like I just couldn't let her out until she had to go out by herself, because otherwise, I mean, the poop would never hit the ground. It was so gross. So, Nancy's right, though. I mean, that sort of stuff, especially if you're seeing it in your young dog, just prevent, because the longer that they're allowed to do it, the more it will go on. Right.
Exactly. So like I said, with my beagle, that's how I stopped her from doing it. And then as she became an adult, she never did it again. She until she died at 18, almost 18. She never ate poop again. But when she was a young puppy, we had to be out there picking up, and then she eventually didn't get a chance to practice it, so she grew out of that. So.
Sorry, Deb.
Yes, but we wouldn't be right dog people if we didn't talk about poop around dinner time. So there you go.
Oh, I used to go to a sushi buffet with a friend, and it would be a random dinner if we weren't talking about poop. So.
Oh wow! Not only inside, yeah. So that's what I mean. A lot of the dogs that eat poop inside is because they want to keep their area clean. Dogs don't usually like to go in their area, so that can be challenging. And again, there's a lot of things that people tell us that you could use, like giving them pineapple or tomato sauce or lots of different. And they sell a ton of stuff out on the market for that. But the truth is, the only thing that I've seen work really well is picking it up and not letting them do it. So that's all I can tell you is that's the easiest way to
Yep.
that. So and again, it's hard to fix because you don't know what causes it. So
yep. And I just wanted to
Joanne.
mention one more scenario of eating things. And this one just came to me, Nance, because I had a dog who did it. It wasn't, something that we'd previously discussed. However, when you have middle-aged dog or sometimes senior dog, or, your dog likes to get into the trash, or you're a big scraps feeder or something like that, pancreatitis can be a real threat, especially to some of the smaller dogs. I had a little Jack Russell pug mix for a little while, and the dog never ate a thing a day in his life. I mean, he was a great dog, never tore anything up, never swallowed things he wasn't supposed to. And so all of a sudden, he's getting really sick, and I couldn't figure out, where is this coming from? Like, what's going on? And he was throwing up. And so, I got him in, and sure enough, he had eaten a chunk of the comforter that I had in his bed, right, in his crate. And they kept asking, like, does he eat anything? I said, no. Well, I flipped it over, and there was a hole in the bottom of it. So he had kind of secretly pulled out some of the stuffing inside a comforter and swallowed it. And came to light, right, the dog had a pretty acute case of pancreatitis, which can be quite painful. So for a dog, they don't know any better, right? All they're trying to do is make that pain go away. They can ingest certain things, thinking it might help themselves, which in turn just ends up causing, something worse. So, that poor guy, he made it through his surgery, and I lost him 4 days afterwards, just because his intestines had perforated, and it was a horrible, horrible time. But pancreatitis is something that you might have a dog your entire life that doesn't eat things, and that can be another reason to cause them to ingest something that they've never done before.
Right. And this goes back to managing their dog's environment, especially when they're puppies, right? Keeping them in a crate or keeping them in a confined space where they can't get to a lot of stuff that they can chew, but also really supervising, checking the dog's toys on a regular basis, making sure that everything's still there, and then also the big thing, which my husband doesn't understand, is when they go out to poop, seeing what that poop looks like. It's huge. And making sure they do poop, because it's really important. Poop is important. It's like you need to know, is it coming out? What does it look like? Because that's going to give you, that's a first hint that there's something not quite right, right? Mm-hmm. Something, there could be something going on. Or if they're eating stuff, that's exactly where it's going to, where it's going to come out at, right? Like the tennis ball pieces, the first time Tango ate it. I just had to make sure they came out. And they weren't in there, and they did. Right. So,
or they come in trailing a string, right? That's never a fun one. Don't pull that, by the way. Just saying.
Because you don't know what that's wrapped around in, right? So.
Right.
Yeah. So it's Yeah, right. And I think most of us that own dogs, and especially do perform, I mean, you really want to see what that poop looks like, and if it's coming out. If the dog typically poops, you want to know how often do they poop, how often, what does it look like, and if their schedule isn't quite right, why not? Right? Is if they have they gone a day without pooping? Okay, one day is not bad, but have they gone several days? Well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And then you might see that discomfort if they haven't gone in a while or whatever. So it's one of those things you really want to pay attention to. And just letting them out to go and not watching and seeing what they're doing is really not a great idea.
Yep. And I know we've moved from chewing to poop, but like, I mean, really, guys, when you're watching
It's
for
connected.
Things, yeah, when you're watching for things in your dog, I don't know why a lot of times we're more dismissive with our animals than we are. I always like to say, treat that if that was your 2-year-old. You know what I mean? If your 2-year-old has diarrhea for a day, right? And you've given them some Pedialyte and you've given them this, if that continues, you're going to go to the pediatrician the next day, right? That's not normal. Same thing. If your kid hasn't pooped in 2 days, they're going to tell you, I don't feel good. Right. And you're going to go to the pediatrician. So, don't wait longer than a day or two when things are weird, right? Because that is when, if there's a serious problem, you can actually start to get, tissue death and really complicate the problems if they can't get help quickly.
Right. I know. Well, Deb, I think most people that live next to dog people think we're all crazy anyway. So I'm thinking, yeah, you need to know what's going in and what's coming out of your dog always, because just like Joanne said, the sooner you catch it, the cheaper it's going to be, right? If you wait till the dog's already showing a lot of lethargy and all those other things, you're already too late. It's going to cost you, right? So definitely being aware. And also the other thing I wanted to tell you, giving your dog too many bully sticks, especially when they're young, like Joanne said, it's a lot of fat in it, and it can cause some digestive issues, especially when they're young puppies. So just use it sparingly. Like I have the 12-inch bully sticks, and when they were young, I would give them a little bit. They would chew it, and then I would take it away, put it away, and then the next day so the bully stick might last them, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. So they're not eating 2 or 3 bully sticks. They're eating one over a few days. Same with the raw bones, right? Because the marrow can be very rich for a young puppy. So you want to give it to them over time so that they can be, in a better situation, and they don't have, and they don't get, stomach upset or diarrhea and all that stuff, which causes, other problems, because you want to keep everything kind of normal. So.
Yeah. And, kind of going back to that a little bit, if you have a puppy that's teething and they're really not interested, which is weird, usually they really want to chew a lot of stuff. But if for whatever reason they're not, or they're not interested in the icy stuff, you can always try putting some ice in their drinking water and just getting that nice and cold. And, maybe perhaps if their teeth hurt bad enough, they don't want to chew on anything. But maybe, some nice ice cold water will help to just kind of chill that mouth a little bit too, and ease some of that pain. Right.
And like I said, we wanted to be aware of pica and eating poop and all that, because those are all kind of connected to the pica. Especially you can miss it. You can just think you have a bad dog, and sometimes it's a little more serious than you think, right? If you're a dog that's had, I don't know how many surgeries over a short time, that's not normal. Most dogs don't have that. So
right.
Something to think about. And there's a lot of different things you can give your dog to chew, like the Himalayan chews, the gorilla chews, and have a different thing. The other thing I wanted to give it, this is a puppy thing. My dogs have a lot of toys, and what I do is when they were young, I would rotate those. I would have 5 toys that they would have out, put the rest away. And then after like 5 days, I would take those away and give them another 5 toys. and that really kept them interested and engaged in those toys instead of having to and not destroy them actually when they're just sitting around bored or whatever and chewing those things. And some of the tough chewy toys, a lot of the dogs I know don't like them. So it's like the Nylabones. Some dogs either love them or they won't touch them. So
yeah.
Really depends.
I have found most dogs that really like the Benny Bones, the Nylabones, those are your more aggressive chewers, right?
Yeah. 20 minutes and get picked up and stuff, refrozen. Yep. And that's what I used to do when my dogs were young as well. So they can get that marrow and they enjoy chewing. Now I don't really give them the raw bones as much. I give them more meaty bones because I don't want them to, crack a tooth or something on there. Because Cha-Cha really likes the bones, and I worry about her busting a tooth, especially now at her age. She's 13, so I don't want to push that. So.
Yep, and you get to know them. Like mine, I do not have very aggressive chewers. I mean, they like to chew. They're not aggressive about it at all. So I do still give bones, and I have yet to have any problems. So.
Yeah. And Nylabones can cause slab fractures. Exactly. So you want to be careful depending on how aggressive your dog chewing is, right? That's why I love Kongs for that reason. It helps just keep it safe, and you can give it to them in a crate where you're not, some of the other stuff you have to supervise it like the whole time they have it, which is fine mostly. But if you're trying to, sometimes we don't pay attention, and then that's when bad things happen. So. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it. We just wanted to kind of touch on the subject, even though there's a ton of information about chewing and different products you can chew and that you can buy for the dogs and stuff. We just wanted to kind of remind some of us the stuff that we already know, because sometimes some of us have been in dogs so long we forgot more than what we remember. So it's just something to. And I just got done with teething dogs and all that. I mean, mine's are 4, so I don't have really chewing. The only one I have to really watch is Tango, and as long as there's no tennis balls, it's usually not a big problem. So anyway, thank you guys. Love seeing you guys this week. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.